why did I want to run this webinar? Basically, I'm of the view that we tend to think about agile, and agile in particular about with software development as being um, the sole source of agile ways of working. And my view is that there is a lot of focus in, create strategic agility through using this framework or that framework. But in reality, what happens is that it's more than just operating at the team level. It's more than just doing that. So I wanted to start to talk about strategic agility. When I meet with customers, clients, and so on, what I tend to get told is, oh, we need to have more agility because fintechs are taking our market share, or because our products are not as delivering as fast as we'd like, or we've got quality or whatever. So there tends to be a strategic goal that is in fact in the outcome that's required from agile. um, some of you will know that I've written a book called Agile Line Out. And for those of you, all of you on the call actually fairly well know me as a agile coach. But just for those who are join or watch the recording, I've been around agile coaching since about 2007. I've been involved in disciplined agile. I'm a disciplined agile instructor for senior scrum master and value stream consultant, and I'm a certified SPC and scrum master and so on. I'm a professional member of the Agile Business Consortium and the Agile Alliance, and I've been involved I'm on Qatar's international panel of agile experts. I've also, in addition to Agile Line Out, which is a framework for change team, I've also written the Agile Coaches Cookbook, or which I use when we're developing Agile coaches courses and so on. I'm currently involved in a technology transformation with over 10,000 employees, international, New York, India, and London. Before that, I was involved with a tier one global bank with 650 teams doing lean portfolio management, 6,000 people in a markets technology function of the global bank. So I'm really involved in big teams and big activities. In British Telecom, for example, I had 4,800 people, and I was the enterprise agility coach in their dynamic infrastructure function. So this dynamic infrastructure function is software as well as hardware, as well as decommissioning, as well as marketing. British Telecom is moving uh, telephone exchanges and wiring into the cloud to actually deliver services in a modern way, the same sort of services in a modern way. In their current environment, they basically consume 0.1% of the UK's power supply. So obviously the cost of operating the traditional telephone exchanges and so on is a key factor in them moving to the cloud and new technology. And in this role, I started to realize that some of the premises of things like Scrum didn't exactly work when you have a team dealing with marketing, a team dealing with hardware, a team dealing with firmware, a team dealing with software, all needing to come together into a single solution for a customer. And I started to realize that some of the activities that we were doing, we could not get to a definition of done within a cycle time for a sprint. So we started to look at how we could run projects and how we could control activities in an agile way, but within the constraints of the situation that we were facing. So in this fast moving digital age, a lot of organizations are facing competitive threats and new opportunities for revenues. And basically, the digital age has created a global marketplace. Um, so give you a non-commercial example of this. I was talking to a friend in South Africa the other day on Zoom, and he said, I've got to drop, John, because I want to join an agile meetup in Edinburgh. Now, before COVID, this was something which would have been, quite rare and so on. But now it seems quite commonplace. So if people can join up with meeting groups in Edinburgh from South Africa, how much more can they buy commercial solutions, or when an organization places its products in the marketplace, how much more can people say, well, I can actually get this cheaper in Buenos Aires compared to what I can get it in Birmingham, or I can get it cheaper in so and so, or better service and so on. So really what's happened is the marketplace in the digital era has expanded beyond our original boundaries. So the result of that is that organizations are starting to realize that there are opportunities for them that they didn't have before, and there are threats to their marketplace that they didn't see before. So the response to that has to be, how do we actually change our organization so that we can respond quickly to those particular threats? In the marketing that is coming through from some of the agile frameworks, they say that, oh, if you use our framework, or it's the framework for business agility or whatever. So how does the improvement performance of a scrum or single scrum or Kanban team actually help, given the opportunities and the threats created by the digital era? I've heard statements that for example, that every company is now a software company. Well, my local brewery would dispute that statement. A car hire business, for example, would also say, are they in the software business? Probably not. So would a car repair business. So these organizations in this digital age are definitely software enabled, but it is not, they don't sell software for their customers, and people don't go and buy a beer because they've got a good software product or good software supporting it. So I would question, how do these agile frameworks actually achieve strategic agility, and what's the role of the team? There's got to be more to it than just a single team doing single work. I mentioned at the beginning that I was involved in the digital disciplined agile value stream consultant examination and so on. And I'm an instructor for that. And I've come to the conclusion that actually what happens is that organizations and strategic agility is actually created by being aware of how work gets done, and the visualization of how work gets done is actually in a value stream. And once you understand how work is getting done, if you see an opportunity or a threat, then you can actually adjust your value stream to be able to deliver it. So for example, if an organization decided that they were currently selling, let's say, loans or insurances in South Africa, and they decide that there's a market in Kenya, then they could actually then change the way in which their value stream operates so that they can start to promote their products to Kenya, to the Kenyan marketplace, and so on. The value stream itself is a graphical representation of the physical people, processes, and software used to deliver a product or a service. And that could be to an internal or to an external customer. Okay, so basically what you do is it's like a process map, and you map that out with the stages that the organization is going through, or let's say buying a beer, let's say, then the process of actually buying the beer, processing the order, picking the beer from the stock, actually then shipping it to John who wants to consume it. All of that is the value stream. Now, there are different types of value streams in an organization. The first type is the operational value streams, and those operational value streams are either the means of fulfilling strategy or generating revenue. So, for example, in a non profit making organization, if it was a charity, then you would find that um, their operational value stream is actually fulfilling the purpose of the charity, providing shelter for the homeless or whatever it is. Then we've got service value streams, and those service value streams enable the organization to operate. Now, they are things like marketing, they are things like financial accounting. They typically have internal customers, even if those internal customers are shareholders. So those service value streams add cost to the organization, but they don't necessarily deliver anything to external customers or people who are working revenue. So those sort of things like marketing, recruitment, financial accounting, all of those sort of things, they still have a value stream, or they still have a process, and people are aligned to that process. They are software systems which are used to deliver that process. And they usually have internal customers. Now we get to the agile bit. Agile project work, or software development, or whatever, or even product development, is what we call a development value streams. Those development value streams develop capabilities for both the operational and the service value streams. So, for example, if you would want, one of the service value streams might have a customer management system, I don't know, Salesforce or whatever. And we would want to develop or enhance Salesforce or deploy Salesforce. That would be a service value stream need, which would be developed in the development value stream or the team that was doing that. If, on the other hand, we wanted to I don't know, increase our capacity in our warehouse for stock management, or for to get throughput going through faster to the customer, that would be an improvement on the operational value streams. One of the key things for me is ownership. What we tend to find is that an operational, or all of these value streams, are divided by the organizational design. And that organizational design creates inefficiencies in the value stream. So when if I start to do a piece of work, I pass it to, I'll pick a name on here, Dale. I can see Dale sat there. I pass it to Dale. Dale's not ready to do it yet because he's doing something else. And then he does the work and he passes it to Ed or Richard, and so on. You get these dividing pieces that go through the organization, and the silos actually slow down or cause problems to the service going to customers, or the cost of operating the service value streams. So one of the key questions I have is, when we're starting to look at organizational agility, we need to get some managerial or executive oversight or ownership of these critical value streams. Okay. Now, what we typically do is create a value stream map, and a value stream map shows where the processes go and who is doing it and so on. And basically, then we also then put metrics on there. Now, those metrics might be flow metrics, like how many transactions are going through the call center, or they typically can also be involved in looking at lead times and cycle times as a minimum. Let me give you an example. We mapped the value stream in British Telecom for delivering a broadband service to a UK customer. Typically, if I order a new broadband service, that customer order is given a lead time to me of 1 month, right? When we realize that other organizations are delivering broadband services a lot faster than British Telecom. So we analyzed the whole of the value stream from the time that the individual picks up the phone and starts to talk to the call center about the fact I want a new value stream, a new broadband service, all the way through to this broadband service is now operational, and that included things like delivery of the hubs and all the other things that goes with it. We organized that, mapped it out, then we looked at the work, how much work is involved. Now, when we looked at the work, we found that there was 4 days work in the process, and everything else was delayed, caused by going from one part of the organization to the other part of the organization. So once we get the overall lead time and the cycle times for each of the work pieces, we knew that we couldn't shorten that value stream to less than 4 days, because that's how long the work was taking. But we could set ourselves a target of reducing it, instead of being 1 month, down to 2 weeks, and start to work out how do we reduce the delays on that particular process. Once you've got that piece, then you can start to decide how to change that, and that's where the development pieces and so on come into play. So basically what we can do is, once we've started to look at that value stream, then that value stream mapping is the way in which an organization may identify where its brand promises are broken. That could be to customers or to employees. We can look where operational challenges exist. So, for example, maybe the cost of servicing a client, for example, in a bank, or it might be the speed of delivery, or it could be that we're getting inaccuracy in the financial reporting, where those operational challenges exist. And then we can decide where adjustment to those value streams are needed and where investment is needed in order to fulfill our strategic objectives. So this gives us a mechanism of deciding what needs to go into our backlogs and what needs to go into our development activities. I find it incredible that most of the agile frameworks start with the backlog. So they don't tell you how to get to a backlog. And this is, I think this value stream mapping piece is an important part of how do we get to a meaningful backlog for strategic change. So it is, in my view, it is the ability to quickly change value streams that creates the strategic agility. That's what the strategic agility is all about. How quickly can you change the value stream? Now, that could be process change, it could be people change, it could be technology change, but it would be all of those things together. So in order to go, once you identify what your strategic goal is, then you can start to change the value streams in order to deliver. So let me give you an example. If we've got the strategic goals of the organization, we could have a strategic goal of accelerating growth. And what the best way to define strategic goals is by using outcomes and key results, OKRs. So our strategic outcome is that we want to place the organization in the top 5 in the sector by market share. And we're going to look at improving customer satisfaction during the next quarter. Now, strategic goals are rarely achieved within 1 quarter. They typically go over 2 or 3 and may even go for a couple of years. So the idea of having a strategic outcome that has a goal, an interim goal in the next quarter, which is measured by a key result, gives you the focus, the laser view on what's actually you've got to achieve in the next immediate period. It's very, very similar to having a sprint goal, but it's at the strategic level. Let's say we've got to maintain, if not improve, profit levels. So this particular company has decided it's going to increase revenue from Kenya. Okay. And that's going to be measured by 20 million additional revenue. So when we start to say, okay, here we've got our goal for the quarter, which is increasing the revenue from Kenya by an additional 20 million, then we can decide how are we going to do that. Okay. So what we can do is start by looking at something called a benefits map. Now, a benefits map comes straight out of managing successful programs. And you can see on the right-hand side, I've got the strategic goal from Kenya. And then we've got strategic enablers. We're going to increase our loans business by 5 million. We're going to increase our mortgage business in terms of revenue by 10 million. And we're going to increase our payments business by 5 million. Now, those strategic enablers are taking the software that's come out of the software engineering teams, and then making it happen. So once you get the piece of software, you don't get 5 million, right? They've got to start to use the software. You've got to start to market the software. You've got to start to engage with customers in order to get that loans business of 5 million. So those strategic enabler buckets that you can see on that chart have more in them than just the software piece. On the left-hand side, then we need a new loans platform or improvements to the loans platform. We've got to deal with mortgage compliance. Now, that isn't a software piece. That could be a regulatory negotiation, filling in the forms and all the rest of it. And then we've got payments modifications, which could be risk scoring or whatever, right? So here we've got a picture of our strategic goal being broken down to decide what are the backlog items that we need to start to think about in terms of improving our teams. Okay, now those could be teams that are business process teams as well as technology teams. So when we look at the overall process, what we've got is a strategic plan. Now, whether that strategic plan is right or not, we're not really concerned at this point. But basically, what we've done is we've broken down the strategic plans into outcomes and key results. What was very interesting at British Telecom was senior management set the outcome, but they enabled the teams that were going to be delivering the outcome to set the key results. Now, that meant that the team was starting to think about, okay, how are we going to measure our success? And then the psychology of that was incredible to watch, because once the team set its goals and said, oh, we're going to deliver, the measurement is going to be 5 million in whatever, then they really worked with tenacity and so on in order to get the goal, because they'd actually set it themselves. And I think that was very cute in the way in which the senior leadership in my part of British Telecom, at least, were working with their teams. Then what they did was, so you had quarterly goals. Then what happens is that the quarterly goals are reviewed at the end of the quarter. Did we get them? Yes or no? They'd also look at the learnings that the team had done. What did they find? Why didn't they get the goal? Why is it more than what they expected? All those sort of things. And then that would go in as input into the next planning session for the next quarter. So those outcomes and key results would be refined in benefits maps. That's again straight out of managing successful programs. And that results in a prioritized backlog, which can then be used by the teams. Now we're getting to how the teams come into play. So having a backlog, now the agile teams can rapidly produce high quality outputs and so on. Agile needs to be applied to all elements of the strategic change, and linking outputs from, let's say, software engineering, from firmware, hardware, environments, or marketing, or HR, all of those things together is actually when this quarterly planning comes into play, because quarterly planning allows you to look at dependencies across all the different work groups and get them into a single room and get them to start to work a cohesive plan that joins all the dots up in the bits of the organization that are needed to collaborate in order to achieve this particular goal. So the strategic change could involve process change, it could involve technology and so on. All of those come into the one environment, and we end up with a plan that is linked to the strategic outcome via the broken down pieces in the OKRs. So we can then see, so this thing about, oh, we've got alignment or we've got to get alignment, you've got a direct line of sight now between an activity that's on a Kanban board for a team and the strategic goal that was set by the organization during their quarterly or annual planning or whatever it was. And this is a major plus because people and individuals can start to see how their piece of activity actually helps the organization to achieve its overall goal. And this is fundamental because once people start to see that, then you get, it encourages engagement, it encourages creativity, it encourages commitment and delivery activities, and it really works significantly well. It's just a huge benefit. I saw some teams in one of the tier one bank I was looking at, and when we did this strategic planning with them, they suddenly said, I now understand how my piece of work fits into the big jigsaw, and their amount of commitment to that piece of work they increased substantially, and they suddenly got a greater part of job satisfaction and so on. I'm reminded of that I think it was JFK that was walking around a NASA building, and he came across a janitor, and he asked the janitor what he was doing, and the janitor turned to JFK and said, "I'm helping putting a man on the moon." Now, I think that, is a big example of how people understand how their bit of the jigsaw puzzle fits into the overall strategic goals. I think with NASA, it's probably more clear than anybody else. But when you start to talk about British Telecom or one of the key banks or whatever, it's very difficult to see how a particular piece of activity actually fits into the overall success of the organization. So there we've got it. Okay. So what I've tried to show you is that we are looking at strategic planning, strategic goals. I think agility is created by the definition of the value streams, being clear about that, keeping that value stream picture in the front of people's mind, having an owner of that value stream. Now, John Cotter says that we should actually align the organizations with value streams rather than functional silos. And I tend to agree that that seems to be a very really good way of organizing people. And basically, you can use the chapter model and basically have cross-functional teams and so on to do that. And you can have metrics management in order to do that. But it means that you've got a single focus, managerial focus, on actually delivering the particular outcomes for a particular organization, for a particular customer, albeit that could be internal or external. So those are the thoughts. Those are my thoughts that I've got. I thought, well, what are your takeaways? What do you think about this? Um, what would you think need to be done in your organization? And you might want to just have a think about that. It may be that you've heard something here which might be of use to you. Um, all of these comments, suggestions, processes, steps, and so on are all in the new version of Agile Lineout. Agile Lineout is focused now on strategic change rather than software engineering. And if any of you have got version 1 or 2 of this Agile Lineout book, if you ping me afterwards, I'll send you a free copy of version 3 so that you've got it. But basically now what we're doing is looking at how can we do strategic change much more succinctly. Interesting enough, in JP Morgan, my bank that I was working with, we used Lineout as the underlying principle for agile transformation, doing something similar where I am today. I may not be telling them that's what we're doing, but all of the principles and practices are being applied. So can I open now for questions? So if anybody's got any questions, observations or whatever, and I'll stop my presentation and then we can chat. quiet.
Jon, what's the latest edition of your book publishing date?
Oh, it's published, mate. It was published on Amazon, probably 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Okay, so I can only find April 2022. So that's the previous version, is it?
Yeah. I'll ping you a link to it, Richard.
Excellent. Thank you, Jon.
You're welcome.
Jon, hi, it's Ed.
Hello, Ed.
Oh yeah. Couple of related questions. One is, how in the hell do you work out what your value streams are, and how do you know that you've got the right ones? And what sort of levels of granularity are we looking at? And that might be organisation dependent, but how do you identify what the key value streams are? Is there a piece of work?
Yeah, there's a bit of witchcraft here, and it sort of works the way in which work out where the revenue is coming from, or the strategic objective. So if you were doing, I don't know, housing for the homeless, for example, how do you deliver those to the organization? I think that getting that. So how do we do that is the critical thing. And then what I like is, in the DA, the Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant toolkit, there's something called the idealized value stream. And the idealized value stream is, if you said, okay, how do we deliver, I don't know, hiking boots to customers if you're an Amazon or something like that? What are the steps we go through? And you map that out. And then you start to look at where the problem areas are in that value stream. Now, because you drew it from an ideal perspective, and you say, oh, this is say we've got a problem with stock control, you might actually dig into that and then end up with updating your value stream map to include the real situation. But basically what you do is you go from the customer and work back. Thanks, Mikael. So that gives you the idea of how to do it, and then that gives you then you need to put some metrics onto it. Now the second question was
the level of granularity. And I mean, because it could be as specific as, how do I sell more hiking boots on Amazon, or it could be your Kenya example, how do I increase my revenues by 20 million over the next.
So I think that you need to get to a reasonable level of granularity given the context of what you're mapping. Now, there was some guidelines saying that it should be more than 7 steps, and it should not be less than 25. Sorry, should not be more than 25. But I think you can get away with something around 18 or that sort of number of steps. I mapped how JP Morgan delivers research to clients, and that came down to 12 steps. And then once you've got the steps, you then map which application systems are supporting that. So that, and then you look at the organization, and that then gives you the levels. Then you look at the metrics that go underneath it.
Right. I'm reminded of business process modeling. It takes me back.
Exactly. Yeah. It's BPR, business process reengineering, right? It's because this all comes out of lean, right? And and in fact, if you go back to Kanban, 1970s, what you find is that the first thing that we talk about is actually mapping the process.
Nothing really changes, does it?
Nothing new under the sun, Ed,
Yeah.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Any questions? Hi, Jon.
Hi there, Jon. Nice to see you. I've got a question. So in many environments that I find where clients try to use Agile, they come a cropper where their governance structure and the way they fund change and project is actually very waterfall. You need to have certain things done first, get a business case. To get that business case and to show the benefits, you need to have done a whole bunch of work, which kind of means that, and I found a lot of people struggling to try and get what is that repeatable kind of value-based process that you want to run through an agile way of improvement versus kind of planning, having the key planning points that you can then put against that kind of waterfall-based governance and funding. In your experience, what have you found a way to help people overcome that barrier between proper agile working and improvement of a value chain versus a traditional waterfall kind of governance and financing approach?
First of all, my experience is you can't fit agile into a waterfall governance process. You have to change it. Okay. Second thing is you need to change some attitudes in finance. Now, when we think about traditional project management, the underlying thesis and philosophy of it is scientific management, which dates back to around 1910, right? If you look at the ways in which we run finances, those were defined by McKinsey in about 1920. Okay, so they are over 100 years old as well. So we need to get away from the finance people tend to want to know all the details of what's in a project, which means that you've got to do big requirements up front and means you've got to do estimation up front and so on. You've got to get away from doing estimates to setting a budget. So if, for example, you said, okay, we want a return on investment of, let's say, 4 to 1, okay, if you've got a $20 million pound saving or benefit, you know that the cost ceiling for that activity is 5, right? Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that you know what the activities are within 5. You can set a budget and then you can use design to cost approaches to make sure that your delivery model or the delivery what you're going to deliver actually fits within your budget. Yeah. Right. And also because you've got this piece about agile typically tries to avoid waste. So what you will be saying is, okay, is this next feature that we're going to do in terms of effort going to cost more than what the benefit is going to get? So you get, it's quite interesting. If you look at the State of Agile report for 2020, I think it says 40% less features delivered, unused features delivered, because there's this thing, quite a lot of bespoke software development ends up with features that nobody wants and nobody uses, right? You think about Word or whatever, or even Outlook, there's loads of features on there I don't use, and I'm sure many of the people on the call would reflect with that. Yeah, but those are the key things. Get them to move away from estimation to budget. Interesting enough, where I am right now, I've just got to start this argument, which is going to be quite interesting. Yeah.
I'm not saying you're assuming this, but we've not really talked about the cultural aspects. You said, get the finance people to have a completely different way of working, stroke mindset, sort of beyond budgeting or whatever it might be. The whole cultural aspect of these sorts of changes, I guess, has to happen in parallel. It's not something that the value stream per se does.
No, it isn't. You're absolutely right. And the interesting thing, Ed, is I think I mentioned to you a few weeks back this dialogic organizational development, right? Basically, the culture, what the underlying thesis of that is that the culture of an organization is actually determined by dialogues. Because I'm a manager, and the way in which I deal with, for example, John, who works for me, sets the culture of the organization. So the conversations do this. There's a technique in the dialogic portfolio called World Cafe. And in that World Cafe, what you do is you identify the business problems and then get people to talk about how they can resolve them, right? And you can do that with the idea of the cafe is that you've got a small table, like in a Starbucks, 4 or 5 people around a table, and another one and another one and another one and so on. And you can get those people then to start to brainstorm what could we do about this, and then you can get them to, the old parking lot, put it up on a flip next to them, and then the other teams can look at each other's flips and then decide what they could do and come up with a consensus again of these are the issues that we want to fix. and then you can start to talk about how you can go about fixing them. But the beauty about that World Cafe technique is that you open up in a non-threatening way some of the fundamental issues of the organization so that people then can contribute to its solution. So the way in which I'm hoping to deal with this, I'm going to get the governance guys and the finance guys in the room and use that World Cafe approach to say, how can we deliver projects faster and so on.
Yeah, what I guess is important, I've not used World Cafe per se, but is that everyone's equal, everyone's contribution
That's right.
is equally valid. There's no hierarchy. Doesn't matter what your job title is. If you're
Yeah.
copy,
You can't have a hippo in the room for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, and I guess the effectiveness of that cafe will also, it will be greater in organizations where management is already open to discuss with subordinates versus an organization where you get the manager and the subordinates sitting around the table and the subordinates thinking, can I actually say this? Can I actually be honest?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
This is all about, a psychological safety, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I in my current role, I've just discovered some data which I'm going to seek some advice about how to socialize it, because I'm very worried that I'll get shot as a messenger.
Yeah.
I just need to understand how the best way to do it, because being a new boy in the organization, I don't want to, go down the wrong path.
Great. Thank you.
That would be a silly thing to do on your last day with the company, as they say.
Yeah. There's the door. Yeah. Anybody else with any questions then before we wrap up? I put an hour and a half in the diary, but I really thought we would take an hour, but no.
No, I'm good. We'll pick up our conversation separately, so I'm happy with that.
Very good. And Richard, I'll send you that link to that book.
Yeah, pop it in the chat, John.
All right, I'll do that.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks
Okay.
so much.
Lovely.
Thanks everybody. Bye now.
Thank you.